how do I foster the same culture we had in the office, but now online? What do you think to this one?
There's certainly, I would say that it's tricky to reproduce what you have in the office
Yeah.
online. And at the same time, there are some workarounds.
Yeah.
So for instance, trying to do some of the same or equivalent things that you do in the office, such as coffee mornings, having virtual coffee mornings, virtual lunch breaks,
Yeah.
lunch and learns, to have some training that everybody participates in,
Yeah.
and setting up collaborative one-to-one, so encouraging people to reach out to each other,
Yeah.
to exchange ideas, help each other with a knotty problem that, although might seem like it will take up time, will often save time, because somebody will come up with a bright idea
Yeah.
that would have taken another person 2 hours to think about, because they don't have the same experience or skill level or whatever.
Yeah, I think I really like the point actually around, kind of the lunch and learns and things. And I think, there's some things that actually you would have done in the office, which now make more sense to do online. And I think, lunch and learns is a great one where you can, do your presentation or just do a talk conversation, and other people can then just jump on and have a listen while eating their lunch and things. And, you can do a lot of spin-offs from that. So you could then do, quizzes, you could do coffee mornings to then actually talk about the material that was given in the lunch and learn. So
Yeah.
it then continues to build upon something as opposed to looking at something in isolation.
Well, it's certainly, when I've, before the remote working, when companies have asked me to deliver a workshop on some soft skills, how to deal with difficult conversations or time management, stress management, things like that, I've often encouraged them to think about doing it in smaller chunks. But of course, if I've got to travel to the venue,
Yeah.
the costs that entails and so on, it's less easy to manage. Whereas if it's all remote, all of that consideration is out the window, and you've got a lot more flexibility to do these short trainings.
Yeah.
And I think when people get things done in it, I suppose it's a bit like the popularity of YouTube videos, in a way that they're short, and then people can go away and just implement one thing.
Yeah.
And I think, obviously having online training is useful, especially if it's live, so that people can ask questions, interact better than when they're pre-recorded online.
Yeah.
But it's that thing of a day-long course, or even half a day-long course, can be pretty overwhelming, and therefore the people default to their normal patterns. Whereas
Yeah.
if they've got few things to think about and implement, it's more likely they'll do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think this kind of goes to looking at people's attention spans as well. And if you've got a training course, as you say, you need to get there and you need to deliver all these modules, then, by the end of the day, when you learn something, it's tiring. You've really got to engage your brain to take everything in, and actually to be able to then deliver things in really short, sweet, snapshots of information. Here you go. It's easier to digest. You can implement it quicker, as you say, and the company can see effective results faster than if you were to pay for a course that takes all day long.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that they'll get a lot more value out of it.
Yeah.
Just having that flexibility.
Yeah.
And, even, it's feasible for me to do half an hour or an hour and to get all the benefits of the live training.
I think actually what you've said there is really good. And in terms of, the training and the learning, we're going back to the question, we're talking about, how do you foster the same culture in the office as online? That's a great way of doing it. And actually, I think it will be more effective to do things like those training online, and you end up building the same sort of culture, or maybe even more of a learning culture and a more effective, better culture, maybe.
Yeah, it can be very bespoke and responsive to the challenges that the team's facing immediately.
Yeah. And I think, you know, when it comes to trying to get that culture from the office to online, there's lots of things to consider. And one of the pieces is around policy and procedures. So the policies and procedures that you've got in the office may not be what you now need while you're online and doing remote working. And so looking at those and focusing on how are you going to build that culture? How are you going to transition the things that you were doing in the office online? You know, you need to write it into your policies, your procedures. You need to collaborate on that, and you need to identify what's actually important to your business and to your teams. What do you want to take over onto remote working and keep? And actually there might be things that you go, why did we even do that in the first place? It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think coming back to the learning point, I know a lot of people I coach, that's one of the things that really makes a job satisfying to them, is when they feel that they're still learning.
Yeah.
But it's not always easy to fit time in these intense timelines people are often working to fit in half a day or a whole day.
Yeah, and you know, I think that's a really good point as well, that people love to learn and they like, you know, they thrive on it, and that's why they go to work, is to, you know, come up with the solution to that problem that's been there for a long time, or to achieve something and learn something that they didn't know before. And where we were doing a lot of training in-house, you know, face to face, there's a real opportunity now to do a lot of it as e-learning and online, and to save, you know, and record the sessions and then have them accessible for other people to use.
Yeah.
And from a business point of view, you know, that's cost effective to do on so many levels, because obviously you're not necessarily paying somebody then to come in and to deliver that training to 12 people. It's now accessible to lots of people over a long span of time. And people can dip in and out, so that'll improve engagement, motivation for people who want to learn and do something new. So it's kind of, you know, ticking all the boxes of yes, 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 do.
Yeah, I think e-learning definitely has its place and lots of benefits, as you were saying. And I think the other part of that is considering the benefit also of the live interaction.
Yeah.
And that fact that the people can ask the questions, and one person's question can stimulate another, or facilitating the training, you can draw out of people, can draw on their different experience, and that shared experience can be very valuable too, and one that then managers can come back to and say, you know, how are you getting on with implementing that we learned in this last bit of training? Or, you know, again, it helps the managers to follow up and make sure people are implementing. So I think the live and the recorded can complement each other.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, if you do end up, because I think there are advantages in having both of them, and I don't think one can solely replace the other. No. But I think what you can do is different things to follow up. So if you did do like an e-learning and it went online, and, you know, 6 months down the line, somebody could pick it up and look at it in isolation, then maybe there's community forums that people can talk about things, or maybe, you know, there's a buddy system. If somebody went on the course, what did they think? Or bring an expert in to talk about it again later, or, you know, follow up on one-to-ones. Like, there's lots of different things to do. Because I know with training, you know, they what's the saying? Don't sheep dip people with the training, because it doesn't work. You know, you get your sheep, you dip it in, and off you go. There's no yeah. It's not effective, is it?
Yeah, so, interesting analogy.
That's always an old classic, that one.
So another thing about fostering the culture you have in the office, I think one thing about meeting in the office is that nobody can switch themselves off visually.
Yeah.
Whereas they can on Zoom.
Yeah.
And well, I suppose an equivalent that I've encountered is people all attending meetings while working on their computers and their laptops. So they think they're multitasking, but actually they're not fully there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's around, active listening, isn't it? And
Mm.
I think that's really important. And I always know, like, you talk to people and you say, are you good? What's a good skill of yours? And they go, listening. Excellent. You actively listen, do you? And they kind of go, oh, not too sure what that is. And you think, well, the difference. Absolutely. And, like being engaged at the moment, we're engaged in conversation and understanding what the other person's saying and thinking about it and, saying it back to them, confirming what's been said, adding extra points on. That's active listening. And I tell you now, I couldn't be on my laptop working while trying to have this conversation.
No.
It just doesn't work. And I think
it's not possible.
No, it's not. And I think, that's really difficult, as you say, to kind of foster online. Have you got any tips to give people?
I think it's about setting a culture, isn't it? That when people turn up online, that they're fully present and that they got their video switched on.
Yeah.
And so that, because so much of conversation is the body language that we see, isn't it? And the facial expressions that help us interpret what the person means, which is why email is so dangerous. It lacks a lot of the signs that we go by to help us understand and develop rapport with somebody. So I think thinking about recreating as much as possible the benefits of that face-to-face culture in the online video conferencing.
Yeah. And I think, that's a great point around kind of emails. How many emails have been sent and you think, after you've sent it, oh, I hope they get the right end of that and they don't get offended by it, or, oh, I really should have just picked the phone up and had that conversation. Because, I think it was something like only 7% of what we say is the words. And the rest of it, like something like 40% is body language. And it's like everything is around how we say it rather than what we're actually saying.
Yeah.
And so when you think about, right, we're now actually remote and online, we need to take that into consideration, don't we? And really make sure that we're having these face-to-face conversations as much as possible.
And I know for some people, they lack the confidence to somehow, some of the people I coach find it hard to be online on a conference call because they can see themselves and it makes them very self-conscious. And so I guess you have to be sensitive to that some people are, find that very difficult. Yeah. And to help them build their confidence around that, which might be giving them good feedback about their contribution in a call or something that helps them feel, oh yeah, okay, I'm performing well at this.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not natural to be speaking on camera all the time. We don't do that. And
no.
I think, on camera as well, especially if some meetings are recorded, it's like it's now set in stone what you've said and how you've said it, where in day-to-day life, you can just say something and it can be there 1 minute and then it's forgotten about. So I think people kind of worry about that. And I think it just, practice takes time. You'll get used to it, or maybe you won't because you don't like it. But maybe there is something for organizations to look at trying to train their employees to use the technology.
Yeah. And there are definitely some things to learn about presenting on platforms like Zoom and Teams and all the ones that are available out there.
Yeah.
Whether it's your personal presentation or the information that you're presenting. So yeah, I definitely think training is a good thing.
Massive one.
I think the other thing is to encourage people to seek constructive feedback. So to have the courage to say, what did you think I did well specifically?
Yeah.
And what's a couple of things you think, well, if I change that, then it would make my presentation or my video conferencing presence more impactful, more dynamic, more helpful, whatever it is. And so training people to ask those questions so they get constructive feedback rather than the open-ended, one. I think quite a lot of people fear asking for feedback because they fear it will all be critical. So by asking those questions, you direct people's focus to a more constructive feedback, but also to volunteer it also. So, you know, really like the way that you has such a professional appearance, and you're very clear in the points you make. And, you know, one thing I think would make it your presence online even better would be that you ask questions or whatever it is.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point there as well. And people they don't want to necessarily know what the answer is either. So they don't ask the question. And I think that goes back to the culture of the business. And, you know, it also goes back to the training around how you give feedback to people. Because some people can be really critical and all they can think of are all the bad things. So I'm going to tell you everything that's really bad about what you've just done.
Yeah.
That's not going to help anybody and give anybody the confidence.
No, exactly. They may seem to accept it, and they may even act on it, but that's not the same as it being a quality feedback. And if that person they're giving feedback to lacks confidence anyway, then it's possible that the critical feedback in the long run will stop them trying new things, or trying things that are a bit more speculative but that would be helpful to the business, or submitting ideas because they're worried about what's going to come back at them.
And I think with that though, it's really important to remember that people come to work to do a good job. They want to do well, and they may be lacking in a skill that they just do not have the capability at that moment to do it to the standard that you want or the business wants. And I think that, you know, you've got to be nice to people. There's a lot of it going around, I know, with kind of, you know, COVID, and we've got to be nice to each other. But actually, I genuinely believe that, like, if you want to get the best out of people, you've got to not judge them against where you are, but judge them against where they currently are and where you want them to be. So if they are on the first step of the ladder and you want them on, you know, this 10th step of the ladder, then you need to give feedback to enable them to progress up those steps, rather than going, no, you don't meet the expectation, you're rubbish, you know, try again. That doesn't help anybody.
Well, no, and I think there's also a place for managers to ask themselves, what's my part in this person's poor performance? You know, there are many questions, if you're having self-reflection, to ask yourself, like, well, how clearly did I communicate the goal? How appropriate was the task to their role? Appropriate to their skill level, or the resources that I gave them to do it? So I think those are questions to ask, whether you're asking your, you know, whether you're managing remotely or not. But I think perhaps even more so when you're managing remotely, because there's so much information you're not getting.
No, I think you're absolutely right on that. So kind of trying to foster that culture from the office to online, it's really difficult to do, but there's definitely lots of ways to have a go and to see how you can actually progress that further.